Boy slips note to officer at coffee shop. The officer reads it and springs into action. John Stewart was taken aback when he saw the handwritten note the 9-year-old boy had just left on the table. If it were any other boy with any other story, it wouldn't affect him as deeply. However, he had a strong personal connection to the situation, which left him feeling extremely nauseous. How in the world did things escalate to this point? Officer Stewart, a deputy at Florida State Police Department, had a deep appreciation for his job. However, life had taught him the importance of finding joy in the small moments. He made a stop every morning on his way to work. Officer Stewart enjoyed stopping at his local coffee shop before work. It was his daily ritual, a moment of calmness before starting the day. He had been doing it for more than a decade and had no plans of quitting anytime soon. However, a visit to the shop left a lasting impact on him. Every time the officer stopped at or passed by the shop, he couldn't help but think about the store's renowned bagels. Their breakfast bagel, in particular, was a personal favorite of his. The exceptional quality of their coffee and their ability to consistently prepare it to his liking was an added perk, but it was ultimately what kept him coming back day after day. He adored the place, eagerly arriving in advance to savor the delectable cuisine and the enchanting ambiance. It was one thing he cherished above all else, especially now that he found himself alone in the world. It brought him joy and contentment, which was all he desired. It was the calm hour he found in the mornings that provided him the resilience to persevere through the challenging days. Officer Stewart had witnessed a lot of experiences throughout his life, and occasionally he sought solace in a momentary respite. That's all there was to it. However, on that particular day, his emotions would be more intense than ever before, all due to the actions of a 9-year-old boy. Officer Stewart woke up that morning with a particular sensation. He experienced a strong sense of discomfort and unease. Initially, he believed he was simply feeling a bit unwell, but he would soon discover that his intuition was warning him about what was coming. As time went on, the officer's emotions grew increasingly negative, eventually setting into a deep sense of unease. He had a strong sense that something bad was going to happen that day. Officer Stewart felt uncertain about the situation, but he couldn't ignore his instincts and let it consume his entire day. He would continue with his usual routine and observe the outcome. Perhaps he was simply overly cautious. Oh, if only he had a clue of what was awaiting him. Officer Stewart followed his usual routine, just like any other day. He prepared for the day and went to the nearby coffee shop to enjoy a cup of coffee and a bagel. However, as he sat there, leisurely sipping his cappuccino, he suddenly realized that he had unknowingly stumbled into the very circumstances his instincts had been cautioning him about. Officer Stewart was in the middle of enjoying his bagel when he suddenly noticed something that grabbed his attention. A couple of individuals entered the shop and found a spot to sit a short distance away from where he was seated. For some inexplicable reason, he found himself captivated by them, even though he couldn't quite pinpoint why. The people who captured the officer's attention were rather ordinary, a mother and her young son. They appeared to have arrived for breakfast, just like the officer. However, after years of rigorous training, he developed a strong feeling to thoroughly investigate the situation. There was a certain inexplicable quality about them that felt off. As the officer had some spare time, he chose to observe the duo for a short period. He observed every detail, from their attire to their choice of food, and noticed a few subtle clues. The mother had coffee but no food, while the boy received everything he had requested. That's what made the officer start thinking. The boy appeared content as he enthusiastically chatted away while devouring pancakes. He was incredibly chatty, giving the impression he had not seen his mother in a long time. However, Officer Stewart had a feeling that things were not as they seemed. If he lacked awareness, he might assume that the boy was merely attempting to disrupt the quietness. Officer Stewart could sense the mother's stress just by observing her expression. However, whenever the boy made a purchase, Her eyebrows knitted together and a hint of worry flashed across her gaze. It was evident that she was carefully considering all the items that would be included in the bill. However, it is puzzling why she would choose to take her son out if she had concerns about the prices. Officer Stewart noticed more than just that. There was an intriguing quality about the mother that captured and held his attention. He couldn't quite pinpoint what it was, but the longer he gazed at her, the stronger that feeling became. Was he familiar with her? Did they have any prior acquaintance? As an officer, he couldn't be certain, but one thing was clear to him. The woman seemed strangely familiar. He seemed to have met her previously. Nevertheless, she possessed a distinctiveness that left a lasting impression on him, particularly her vibrant red curls. However, he couldn't identify her. As Officer Stewart continued to watch the mother and her son, memories began to rush back to him. The officer became increasingly frustrated as he struggled to recall where he knew her from. He had a reputation in the local community and was always attentive to the people he had previously interacted with. However, he was uncertain about whether or not he had previously been in contact with this woman. Officer Stewart attempted to direct his attention towards the woman and carefully observe her characteristics. He was desperate to find a clue, any clue that would trigger his memory of her, but no matter how hard he searched, he couldn't find any link between his memories and that woman. If he had knowledge of her true identity, perhaps he would gain a deeper comprehension. The officer was fully engaged and attentive throughout the entire visit, driven by his curiosity and desire for answers. As he enjoyed his bagel and coffee, his gaze remained fixed on them. However, the officer's time was running out. Officer Stewart delayed receiving his bill until the final opportunity, but eventually had to collect it. He had stretched his trip to the maximum capacity, and he couldn't afford to waste any more time. Little did the officer realize that there were others equally captivated. Another observer had been keeping an eye on him, ready to reveal themselves. As the officer prepared to depart, he was suddenly halted by the delightful sound of a thrilled child. He glanced up to see who it was, and his face immediately paled. The officer felt a sense of embarrassment as he had been caught off guard. But his intention held the greater significance. The boy had a message that would have a profound impact on the officer's life. "Hello, officer," said the little boy, who had captivated his attention throughout the entire visit. "Hey there, kid," Officer Stewart greeted with a gentle tussle of the boy's hair. The officer was confused, yet fascinated. Perhaps this is his opportunity to get some answers. Little did he realize that the answer would not meet his expectations. "How may I help you?" Officer Stewart said. The boy casually sat down at the table where the officer was seated, showing little concern or interest. What was his intention? Was his visit as straightforward as it appeared, or was there something else behind it? The officer would soon discover, but was he prepared for what he was about to hear? Officer Stewart couldn't help but feel the blend of interest and worry. The situation had unexpectedly shifted for the boy. The conversation was unremarkable. It appeared to be a young boy showing interest in the field, and the officer was pleased to share information with him. However, the boy had a hidden agenda, and the officer would only realize it when it was already too late. A note had been discreetly placed on the table by the little boy during the conversation. Officer Stewart seemed preoccupied with sharing his stories, oblivious to the kid's hand gestures. However, after the boy departed, he noticed the envelope resting on the table. Officer Stewart felt a sudden jolt in his chest. What did the envelope contain? Officer Stewart was taken aback as he glanced at the beige envelope labeled with the word "Officer." Only because he had developed a habit of checking his table before leaving did he notice it. Fortunately, he managed to do so, and now he could discover its contents. Was he prepared for that? The officer sat back down to read the note. For some inexplicable reason, he had a sense that the world was on the verge of collapsing. He felt nervous with sweaty palms, a racing heart, and a bead of sweat on his head. What could have caused his current emotional state? Did his gut have another warning for him? Upon noticing the officer's continued presence, the waitress kindly informed him that it was time to leave. Despite the note, the officer seemed to overlook her completely. He only required a brief moment, a mere moment, to grasp the message the young boy was attempting to convey. What happens if the child is in trouble? He felt compelled to stay and uncover the truth. The officer eagerly tore open the envelope and retrieved the handwritten note left by the boy. Initially, he felt no significance for him, but as he delved deeper into the material, he gradually grasped the true nature of the situation. The boy was not facing any difficulties, but his mother was struggling, and he was doing everything he could to assist her. The note mentioned that the boy and his mother would regularly visit the coffee shop to strengthen their bond. However, during that month, they encountered a few challenges. A few days ago, his mother was pulled over by the police. Despite her explanation about the emergency and her son being hospitalized, she was still fined. What was the relevance of Officer Stewart in that situation? Due to financial restrictions, his mother had to forego breakfast and the fine, resulting in her going without a meal. However, the boy couldn't bear to witness her unhappiness, so he decided to contribute all the money he had saved to cover the fine. It was at that moment the officer recalled her identity. He was the one responsible for imposing a fine on her. He glanced upwards, seeking to gain clarity on the situation, only to find that the duo had already departed. What options does he have at this point? It was unintentional for him to cause such a financial burden on that small family. Little did the officer realize that this would only start his voyage of investigation. The penalty was merely a small part of the enormous problem he had unexpectedly encountered. Everything was connected: the boy, the note, and his mother, all pieces of a larger plan. Officer Stewart found himself entangled in a complex plot that would completely alter his life and challenge his beliefs. Officer Stewart felt a wave of disappointment wash over him as he noticed that the woman and her son had departed from the coffee shop. In a hurry, he sprang up from his chair, leaving the envelope and note, and dashed out to the bustling street. Will he be able to locate them? Would he resolve the confusion he had created, or had he run out of time? He quickly scanned the surroundings, hoping to catch a glimpse of them. He inquired with individuals walking by if they had spotted a woman with vibrant red curls and a young boy, yet it appeared that no one had taken notice of them. How could he possibly locate them, now that they had vanished? He lacked any identifying information. Officer Stewart felt a pang of regret for not once lifting his gaze as he read the letter. He was completely engrossed and deeply touched by its contents, hoping that the individuals mentioned would be present so he could offer his assistance. He had to locate them. He felt remorseful for what had happened. He was completely unaware of the woman's circumstances. If he had, he would have allowed her to leave. However, it appeared that he had arrived too late. The officer deeply regretted not recognizing the woman sooner. He felt responsible for her distress and wished he had been more understanding. With a sense of urgency, he quickly returned to his patrol car and contacted his colleagues over the radio. He relayed the details of the situation and asked for assistance in finding the woman and her son. He would go to great lengths if necessary. An inner drive compelled the officer to locate the woman and her child, offering assistance to extricate them from the predicament he had inadvertently caused. However, he couldn't accomplish his task by himself. He needed to utilize the available resources at his disposal. If he needed assistance from his colleagues for a personal endeavor, then he was willing to ask for their help. He had no other option but to find them. He had to conduct a meticulous investigation, and it wouldn't be that easy. It is impossible to determine the direction they took or the type of transportation they used. Officer Stewart faced a challenging task, but he remained determined to locate them. He wanted to fix this situation. Officer Stewart faced difficulties in finding the woman and her son as time went on. He patiently lingered at the coffee shop every day, hoping to catch a glimpse of them once more. However, all efforts proved useless as they never appeared, leaving Officer Stewart with limited choices. Will he locate them? The officers on the force dedicated their free time to tracking down the woman, but their limited availability constrained their efforts. Nevertheless, they persisted in their efforts to assist their friend, although they were uncertain of the outcome. Without any information to rely on, their task became exceedingly difficult. Officer Stewart recognized the importance of collaboration and expressed sincere gratitude for the assistance he received. He successfully enlisted the support of numerous officers in his department, and they all offered assistance whenever possible. However, due to the lack of severity, they couldn't dedicate all their time to it. At this point, Officer Stewart was growing increasingly frustrated, and so were many of his colleagues. Where did the woman and her son go? However, Officer Stewart was determined not to give up. He understood that the importance of pursuing the trail before it became completely cold. He recalled the previous case where he had waited too long, causing the trail to go cold. As a result, they lost the person they were searching for, and it was quite a hassle to backtrack and review everything they had overlooked. He became even more resolute. Officer Stewart, with the help of his fellow officers, managed to acquire surveillance footage from nearby stores and gas stations in order to trace the woman's car. There were numerous hours of footage capturing the events that unfolded around the diner during a specific moment. Would this provide him with any hints, or was he simply squandering his valuable time? Based on the information available, they were searching for a silver 2016 Toyota Camry. With a clearer understanding of their objective, the task became somewhat more manageable. However, the question mentioned, would this newfound knowledge ultimately bring him closer to his target? Would a blurry image on a screen guide him to the right direction? Or was he merely embarking on another fruitless pursuit? They carefully reviewed hours of surveillance footage, analyzing every detail and paying close attention to vehicles that matched their description. Officer Stewart was determined to dedicate countless hours to locate the elusive mother and son. Despite the challenging nature of the task, he felt a strong sense of responsibility towards them and couldn't bear the thought of not being able to locate them. After extensive investigation, they eventually spotted a car that perfectly matched the given description, as it was seen leaving a gas station in the vicinity. Officer Stewart's heart filled with excitement as he and other officers swiftly hopped into their cruisers and began following the coordinates to chase after the car. He was determined not to lose sight of what was at stake. As the car cruised down the street, Officer Stewart experienced a range of emotions swirling within him: anxiety, relief, and nervousness. He couldn't determine which one held more power, but he preferred to think it was a relief. Now was the perfect opportunity for him to correct his mistakes. That would be the situation if nobody unexpectedly presented him with another challenge. They were led away from the bustling city and into a quiet, remote rural area. The road stretched on endlessly into the night, shrouded in darkness. Officer Stewart's firm hold on the steering wheel intensified as he pushed the patrol car to its maximum speed, resolute in his pursuit of the woman. Finally, they arrived at the damaged house, hidden in the depths of the forest. The officer cautiously approached the house, their flashlights piercing through the darkness. Officer Stewart approached the location with caution, pondering if this was the residence of the woman and her son. Officer Stewart couldn't help but cringe at the thought. This was certainly not what he had anticipated when he issued the woman a ticket that fateful day. He had no idea what he was thinking at that moment. But he stood there, observing the creepy, deserted house. He realized that his initial impression was completely incorrect. The officer meticulously combed through the vacant house, their footsteps resonating in the hollow rooms. The room was filled with dusty furniture, shattered windows, and the remnants of a forgotten past. Officer Stewart was concerned about the living conditions of this place, as it seemed unsuitable for anyone to reside in. He wished they resided in a more hospitable location. However, Officer Stewart couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity as he made his way through the house. What was the reason for his inattention? He was becoming increasingly frustrated by his lack of memory, desperately trying to recall the reasons behind his emotions. There was a growing feeling of familiarity, compelling him to uncover the enigma hidden within these walls. In a modest, softly illuminated room, Officer Stewart came across a photograph. The image showed a youthful portrayal of the woman he had met before, beaming with joy alongside a man and a young boy. It suddenly dawned on him with great force. The woman standing before him was none other than Laura, his childhood friend, and the boy by her side was her son. Officer Stewart came to a sudden halt. Officer Stewart's thoughts raced as he attempted to reconstruct the fragments of their lost history. Memories rushed in, blending with a feeling of recognition that had plagued him ever since he laid eyes on Laura. He had completely lost touch with his childhood best friend. Officer Stewart was astonished. He had an urgent need to locate her immediately. He fondly remembered their childhood escapades and the commitment they made to always support one another. However, at some point in their journey, life had caused them to drift apart, fading away those cherished memories. Officer Stewart was overcome with a wave of sadness as he realized he had lost contact with Laura. He was determined to locate her and rectify the situation. With his newfound knowledge, Officer Stewart's determination to find Laura and her son intensified. He transformed from a dedicated officer to a caring friend, ready to offer the much-needed support she craved. He decided not to wait at the house, just in case they had moved, so they left. However, the officer was forced to start over as his previous clue had proven to be unsuccessful, had brought him to a vacant house, brimming with only memories. The picture, though, has the potential to completely alter the game. Despite its age, the image revealed the person he was searching for. If only he could extract the information. It held the potential to bring about significant changes. Armed with the information they had collected, the officers pressed in their quest to find Laura. They revisited familiar locations from their past in search of any leads or individuals that might have information about her location. Once again, Officer Stewart waited at the cafe, hoping to catch a glimpse of them. However, they failed to make an appearance. He inquired with the waitress about returning to the establishment, but unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. Time passed and the search felt never-ending. Officer Stewart's determination to locate his long-lost friend grew stronger, driven by his regret for not recognizing her sooner and the unbreakable connection they once had. He once believed they would eventually be together, but life had other plans. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Officer Stewart received a phone call from a familiar face who had caught wind of the search. According to the individual, Laura and her son were spotted in a neighboring town, where they were seeking assistance at a shelter for families facing hardships. This was exactly what he needed. To make a significant advancement, Officer Stewart acted swiftly. Officer Stewart's heart raced with anticipation as he expressed gratitude to the caller and hurried to the shelter, a whirlwind of emotions swirling in his mind. Would Laura recognize him other than the officer who issued her the ticket that fateful day? Would she still remember him after all this time, or would he hold resentment towards him? Officer Stewart arrived at the shelter. Filled with excitement, he stepped into the busy facility, searching the rooms filled with people, hoping to catch sight of Laura's vibrant red curls, and suddenly, amidst the crowd, their gazes locked. It was a beautiful moment, a reunion that went beyond words. Officer Stewart's eyes filled with tears as he approached Laura and gave her a warm hug. Within that hug, all the unspoken sentiments between them discovered comfort. Years of separation and misunderstandings dissolved, leaving behind a bond and a mutual comprehension. Laura's eyes reflected a combination of relief and gratitude as she softly uttered, "I had no idea it was you, James." As they sat in a peaceful corner of the shelter, Laura recounted her difficult journey of adversity and hardship. She had gone through a difficult divorce, the sudden loss of her parents, and financial struggles that left her and her son without a home. Overwhelmed by the sense of despair and isolation, she had lost all faith. The ticket she got from him was the last straw. Officer Stewart listened attentively, feeling a deep sadness with every word spoken. He made a solemn commitment to assist Laura in reconstructing her life, just as they had pledged to one another many years ago. He felt a strong sense of responsibility, aware of the opportunity to correct things. Initially, he had planned to dismiss the ticket, and subsequently, he intended to locate suitable accommodations for them. Officer Stewart later discovered that Laura named her son James after him. The people quickly learned about Officer Stewart's efforts to assist Laura and James. His dedication inspired people who came together to offer their support. Various forms of support flooded in, including financial aid, employment prospects, and even housing possibilities. Laura was amazed by the overwhelming support they had received. The generosity of others was beyond her expectations. Thanks to the support of the community, Laura and James were able to find stability and start from scratch. Officer Stewart faithfully stayed by their side, offering guidance, friendship, and reassurance as they adjusted to their new life. Officer Stewart discovered a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment that was absent for quite some time. Laura and James were like a family to him. However, in the midst of the newfound hope, a troubling revelation emerged. Officer Stewart made a troubling discovery. Laura's ex-husband, who had inflicted immense suffering upon her, had recently been released from prison. Officer Stewart was filled with fear and concern as he anxiously thought about Laura's safety. He understood the urgency of taking immediate action to ensure her safety. Officer Stewart worked together with his colleagues to put in place enhanced security measures around Laura and James. They placed police officers in the neighborhood, and Laura was given a panic button to swiftly notify the authorities in case of any perceived threats. Officer Stewart stayed by Laura and James's side, ensuring their safety and providing the necessary protection.